So yeah, I'm really excited you guys are here. I really made this event with the intention of like connecting with your past in a way that is more creative. I think a lot of times, when we're trying to heal from something or something has happened in the past, it's really easy to think a lot about what happened or um, start having dreams about it or ruminate on it a lot. And so I'm going to share a method with you guys, which is a way that you can connect with your body through art. And so it's a really great way to connect with your feelings and express them and release them and connect with the past from the point of the present rather than, oh man, but this thing happened to me 10 years ago. So it's more about really connecting with whatever feelings you might have about the past through what your body still holds right now, rather than having to go back into all the stories and all the characters and all the things that people said, because all of that just kind of keeps us in this like never ending spiral. So, yeah. Um, so I need to see, okay, yeah. Um, so acceptance is a process. It's I really see it as an art, like it's something that you have to devote yourself to developing. It's not as simple as, oh, I just accept my past now. I think that there's a lot of this kind of like cheesy self-help stuff on the internet, and it's very confusing for people who are in vulnerable states and vulnerable situations. So I also kind of wanted to make this event as a space to demystify certain things and also talk about how you can genuinely accept your past and feel that sense of acceptance, but it's a process and it's also about your approach to doing that. So I think a lot of times people will say things like, oh, just get over it. The past is the past. It already happened. Move on, let it go. And I think that these kinds of phrases create a sense of violence within ourselves because if you can't let it go, because it was really difficult for you, or because there are still some things within whatever happened in the past that you need to see or learn, then there's a shame, like a cultural shame that comes up of like, oh, but you're dwelling on the past, or you're being negative, or things like that. So yeah, I think it just gets us at a deeper disconnect with ourselves. And I think that our pasts really have so much, they're like a wealth of knowledge. Like whatever you personally specifically have experienced in your own way is your personal archive of information and situations that you've been in that you can call on at any moment and be like, wow, I went through something like this before, and now I can see it from this perspective. And so I think that it's actually a gift, everything that we've lived, no matter how difficult it's been. Um, so yeah, I want to actually take 8 minutes. I'm gonna set a timer. I also want to mention before we go further, like you guys can write in the chat at any moment. You can unmute yourself. You can do like I think there's a button that you can raise your hand. And this is a very interactive event. So if you have any questions at any time, feel free to interrupt me. But yeah, so before we go into like the deeper material of this event, I just kind of want you guys to take some time for yourselves to get clear on some certain things. So the first question is, what kinds of thoughts come up for you when you're taking time to heal and accept your past? So what kinds of ways do you tend to look at your past? How do you think about yourself when you're doing that? And that kind of goes into the second question, which is, what beliefs about the past come from your family and your cultural upbringing? Like, do you still feel like it, maybe you feel shame about the fact you're delving into your past because everyone in your family is like, well, just let it go. But it doesn't work like that. And so I think if you see it like that and if you can't let it go, it's because you have a higher sensitivity and a higher level of awareness towards your actual true feelings. And I think that that's beautiful and needs to be protected. Yeah, and so the third question is, what beliefs are you intentionally replacing with other ones? So maybe through this event and afterwards, instead of thinking, oh man, I really just need to forget about this thing that happened to me 10 years ago, maybe you change your belief to, cool, that thing happened, I'm still working on it, and I'm really excited to delve deeper into what I learned there and how I can bring those lessons into my daily life. So, yeah, those are the questions a little bit. I'm gonna set a timer, and yeah, you guys can start now. Yeah, so this is the technique that I mentioned. Can you actually, are you guys able to read the full screen or do the, no, you're not. Okay. Are you able to read it now? Wait, but I can't see you guys. Okay. Now can you read it? Okay. So, so basically this is a guided drawing technique. This is designed by a psychologist who worked with art therapy, and then she kind of developed her own system. um, really focused on the body, because a lot of art therapy focuses a lot on the mind and symbols and working with symbols and the mind. So yeah, so this technique will activate both sides of your brain, and so it'll get both sides, since both since each side of your brain controls certain parts of your body, it gets your whole body into what you're drawing. So I'm not going to share a lot of information about it now because I kind of want you guys just to jump in and see how it feels. So I'm just going to say, before we start, I'm just going to set a timer for like 5 minutes so you guys can try this out. Um, what is necessary for this to work is if you have some tape, or if you have like some rocks or like paperweights or something that you can put on the edges of a piece of paper. Like you can stick it to a desk and then it won't move. That's a really important part. So if you guys want to take a minute or two to grab some stuff, um, yeah, like you can tape the corners. Okay, yeah, we're good. So once you have things to kind of put weights on the corner or tape or whatever you found, um, the key parts of this technique are to make sure that you're moving in a rhythmic way and that you're using both of your hands. So I drew this little thing kind of as an example. So you're gonna use both of, like, you can use crayons, you can use colored pencils, whatever you've got basically is fine. These are just examples of like shapes. And then what you're basically doing is you've got your piece of paper taped to your surface. So you're using both of your hands at the same time and you're moving in a rhythmic way. And so what being in this rhythm makes it a lot easier for you to stay present. And so that's really the important part, is to use both of your hands, have your eyes closed, and to do this rhythmically. So, and when I say rhythmically, it doesn't mean that both hands have to be doing the exact same thing, because that's a little bit difficult. It's more about just, is this hand moving in a rhythmic way? Is this hand also moving in a rhythmic way? Are they moving in a rhythmic way at the same time? Okay, perfect. So I'm just gonna set a timer for 5 minutes. Um, just do whatever shape you feel, and yeah, just make sure that your eyes closed, both of your hands, and rhythmic. That's it. Those are the three pieces. um yeah, and if you have any questions throughout, just unmute yourself. I mean, you can open your eye at some point if you're kind of like, what am I doing? That's normal. I think.
Alright.
But the point of having your eyes closed is so that you're not really focused on how it looks like, because that's not the purpose of this. It's really just about expressing your feelings, whatever you're feeling. So, you're getting into your body, like that pain that you mentioned, for example. All right, I feel this pain. What shape is that? Maybe you want to scribble with both of your hands, for example. So it's more about that. So yeah, having your eyes closed is best. If you guys want to share, it's totally open. If not, it's fine. Um, I'm just gonna talk a little bit more about the shapes. So, so basically, there are two shapes in this activity, like two kind of basic types of shapes. So one type of shape is like more linear, more angular, and the other type of shape is more circular. So I didn't explain this before we did for 5 minutes because I kind of wanted you guys just to kind of see how you felt about doing this. Um, some people when they do it for the first time, they feel a little bit uncomfortable because it's a very it's an activity that kind of forces you to be very present with your feelings. Um, so, yeah, basically, to enhance this practice, what you can do is also become very aware of the kinds of shapes that you're using in your drawing. So, if in your drawing you see a lot of lines, that's normally kind of what's getting released. That's what's getting expressed. That's what you're kind of just like wanting to get rid of, So, if you're scribbling, there's a lot of lines, things like that. It's more so the woman who created this technique, she's a Jungian psychologist. So basically, she referred to like the linear shapes as um, like the conscious mind, kind of what you see on the surface, and then the circular shapes correspond to the unconscious mind. So when you are using a lot of the linear shapes, it's sort of kind of getting rid of what you're seeing within yourself. Like it's helping you to connect with what's happening in your mind, like these kinds of like chaotic feelings that you might have, like things that you're a little bit more aware of. Whereas the circular shapes, the more kind of open, softer shapes, really connect you with the unconscious. So as you kind of play around with both of those, you can see what comes up, like all of this is very experimental and depending on you and how you personally feel and what you're processing. Um, But yeah, 'cause you can do this practice for as long as you want to, like you can do it for a half hour, an hour, whatever you feel. So if you've got a lot of stuff that you're trying to process, that's also why I wanted to share this. If you've got a lot of pain that you feel from the past or sadness, grief, things like that, and you want to just let it out, every time that you come into this technique, always make sure that you take at least a few minutes at the end to do those circular shapes because it also kind of helps your body be like, all right, I can relax now. I've just released a lot of emotion. Now I can kind of calm down because those shapes are also kind of like a massage. Like when you do those shapes, it sort of feels like that in your body as well. So the shapes and the way that you move your body, that's where it also really connects with what's going on in your body. Because of course you're getting your emotions onto paper, but you're also releasing them through the movements that you're actually doing. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I think that's exactly what I wanted to explain. So is there anything else that you wanted to share? Okay. Um So yeah, so basically that's kind of the process. So when you're trying to process something, you can always go back and forth between the more angular shapes, linear shapes, and the circular ones as much as you want. And I think that that's a natural flow that happens for people. But if you find yourself in a moment of doing this activity, and you feel maybe overwhelmed because a lot of emotions are coming up, that's when it's really good to move into those soft circular shapes and maybe slow down a bit so that you feel like you can continue. So, yeah, so now that I've explained that, I kind of wanted to try this out for another 10 minutes so you can go a little bit deeper and play around with those shapes. Does that sound good? It's honestly best to keep your eyes closed when you do this.
Okay. So we'll do it intentionally, like that scribble, then
Yeah, so you can
scribble.
I kind of just I didn't mention this before we did the 5 minutes because I kind of just wanted you guys to play around and see what shapes you drew naturally. But this time since it's a little bit longer, you can intentionally start with the linear shapes and then go into the circles, or you can go like in and out, like scribble a little bit and then draw some circles. You can just kind of play around and see what feels good for you. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And while you guys are still kind of in this relaxed state, I just wanted to take another 5 minutes to reflect on how that experience was. So you can write your answers down. Basically, the questions are just how was the overall experience for you? What emotions did you experience? What shapes do you feel like represented those emotions? Um, and would you like to bring this tool into your life moving forward? And if you feel like you would, how would you like to do that? So, yeah, I'm just going to set a timer for 5 minutes and you can think about these questions or write them down somewhere. I think it's just a good way to kind of close whatever happened as you did that. So, yeah, okay, so here I wrote, but I can't read it. Okay. This practice is a way that you can connect with feelings you have in the present that can be related to or transport you to the past. So if you come into this practice with a specific intention of wanting to release something specific, and as you're drawing, you remember things from the past and it becomes really painful, that's okay, and I think that's also a cue to maybe stop and breathe, take a break, do those big calming circles. Like whatever you feel is right. I think the most important part is it's just the fact that you're doing it. It doesn't really matter how it looks. I think it just matters that you're having that dedication to doing it. And it doesn't have to necessarily be this practice. It's just wanting to connect with your feelings in the present moment in any way that feels comfortable for you, um, and not going so deep into the analyzing and the thinking about the past. So I think that's really the point of this practice is just to let go of all the mind drama stuff and just really get into the body and get present with the pain and the sadness and anything that's related to your past, and know that that's not easy. you know um like, I know it seems like a very simple practice, and it is, like, the essence of it is very simple, but I think what you're actually doing is not easy. So I think it's also to be really aware of that and always making sure that whatever length of time you do this for, that you end it with those soothing shapes so that your body has this cue of like, okay, I can relax now, and maybe go and do something that makes you feel joyful, hang out with your friends, like do something that's fun for you as well, so that you also feel like you don't have to go so deep into those emotions and stay there, but you're closing that practice out with something that makes you feel calm. Okay, that's enough for today. I'll come back to this tomorrow or next week or whatever you decide, if you decide that you would like to implement this. Um, yeah, and kind of just knowing when enough is enough. So I wanted to talk actually a little bit about creative storytelling in terms of your past as well. And I think that this is actually like a really good complement to that practice, because that practice goes really deep into your emotions and into what's happening in your body. But this is a little bit more being playful with your mind and the way that you see things. So yeah, your past is your unique life story. I kind of see it as a fingerprint. It's yours and it's only yours. And even though it might be similar to other people's past, it will never be exactly the same. And your perception or your interpretation or what you've learned from your own past will always be unique. And so you can do anything with that story. And like any story, it's meant to be told. So not necessarily like you have to display it or you have to tell it to a lot of people. You actually don't have to tell it to anybody. But I think at the very least, you've got to tell it to yourself and be really clear about what that story means for you and how you relate to that story now. So yeah, I think some important questions are just to ask yourself, do you feel comfortable telling your story? And this doesn't have to necessarily mean with other people. I definitely think that if you feel comfortable telling your past story to a certain extent, of course you don't have to include all the details, to other people, that does kind of represent some level of peace with your past and some level of disidentification with it, of like it's not eating you alive anymore. You're not shameful of it, you're not trying to hide it, you're not trying to avoid it or run away from it, but rather you've kind of moved through that tunnel and you're like, all right, this is my story, and actually I can share this story and people might get something out of listening to it. And so you kind of also see it in more of a positive lens. And I think it's also important to recognize, how do you tend to talk about your past? And that's also just how you talk about it silently in your head, you know? So if you've experienced certain things in the past, it could lead to you in the present moment experiencing similar things or things that remind you of those things. And you might have thoughts like, oh, why does this always happen to me? You know, or this kind of feeling like you're fighting against life. And so I think it's just kind of about, do you feel comfortable with your past? Um do you feel like your past can even inspire you in some way, I think it's kind of gauging your comfort level with your own past and how much you have allowed it to be a source of wisdom and not a source of self-deprecation. So another key piece here is to recognize that, okay, so I actually already said this. So yeah, your past, this is basically just saying what I said before, your past is your unique blueprint in your life, and it's what has also created your perspective now. And so as you relate to your past as a story that only you can tell from your unique perspective and outlook, there's a deep liberation that happens. Um, and there's no longer this comparison with other people because your past is incomparable. Even if it seems similar to other people, it's not comparable because you will always interpret your past through your specific perspective. And that's what makes it yours. And you've lived it through your body and through your experiences and through your eyes and your ears. And so I think that really truly recognizing that gives you this sense of, who cares what other people thought about me in the past? Who cares what other people will say about my past or how I interpret it now? It becomes really about you. What is your relationship with this very, like, you can think of it as a time capsule that only you have access to. It's like your secret archive that no one can touch. They have to be invited into that space. And so you've got all this information, and no one else has the exact same information. And so you can see it as sort of like like a gem, like a jewel in a cave or something. It's yours. And the deeper that you go into discovering what it means for you and how it's still, things from the past still come into your present life, the more that the beauty of that jewel shines into your life and into the way that you feel, because you've gone into the depths, you've got that jewel, and you're like, wow, all right, I've got the jewel now. No one else can touch it. And this jewel is unique, and no one else will be able to find the same one. So it becomes your friend, it becomes your ally, and it becomes something that you can actually celebrate at some point. But I'm not saying that as like, you need to celebrate your past now. I think that there's a lot of kind of like confusion about these things. And I think it's more about knowing that you can get to a point where you do truly celebrate your past, but that's not an overnight process. And that is where the process of really going into these deeper emotions can take you to, and they can take you to tapping into a deeper level of wisdom that you uniquely carry. So then I always talk before what the slide says. It makes me laugh. So yeah, your past then becomes a source of inspiration for you. And it can guide you and it can guide other people as well because you've kind of integrated it into yourself. You feel comfortable with it. Um, you feel safe with it. I think that's actually the key word. You feel safe with your past. And it doesn't cause you, like, every time you think about a certain thing that happened in the past, it doesn't cause, you know, chills or fear or like this closing up type of feeling, but rather when you think about your past, it gives you this sort of expansive feeling. And that's not, I think that this is like a really fine line, because you probably won't feel that way all the time through doing this kind of work with your emotions. Because at some point, yeah, you might feel that pain from the past again, and that's totally normal. But I think the point is that, you know, a higher percentage of the time when you do think about your past through really deeply expressing whatever feelings you have in relation to it, you will come to a point where most of the time it won't feel painful, and most of the time it will feel light and inspiring and interesting, but not necessarily all the time. And so this is actually where I wanted to bring in working with symbols. As I kind of mentioned in the beginning, most art therapy does work with symbols. And so this is kind of the things that I wanted to combine a bit. So as you express your past events through the language of symbols, you can creatively connect with it, which can then connect you more deeply with your unique gifts, what you want to create in life, and your true self expression. So symbols are really important. Symbols are really important ways for your mind to recognize something from a more like your subconscious recognizes images and symbols instantly. And so what we're gonna do now, basically to kind of wrap up the whole event, is just to choose. I put 5 to 10, but you can choose as many events as you want. It can be one. It doesn't have to be a lot. Um, and just kind of any past event that you've been working on healing or accepting, and just kind of creating a symbol for each one. So these symbols can be super simple, and you can also choose colors that represent the event and how you'd like to feel about that event as you keep working with your past and keep working with the feelings you've got. So, what I mean by symbols is just any image that maybe represents the pain that you felt in the past. You can actually make multiple symbols for each event, but I think it's better to start with one. So, you know, you can just you can kind of be creative with it, like, okay, you can think of a certain event and then how can I symbolize this event in a way that I instantly recognize it and know what that event is. I don't know if that I hope I'm explaining this well. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. So so yeah, that's basically it. So I'm gonna set a timer for maybe 5 minutes, and you can just choose an event or two or 5 to 10, whatever you feel, and just draw a symbol that feels good for you. It feels kind of like a healthy way for you to relate to that event. So it could be a question mark, it could be a dot, it could be very simple, or it could be as complex as you'd like. So, yeah. Okay. So that's the end of 5 minutes. I'll send you guys the slideshow for this as well, so you guys can go back into these practices and see what you'd like to maybe do for a longer period of time. But yeah, basically, I just wanted to say, the whole thing with symbols is that if you've got a certain intention about something that you're trying to accept in your past, if you draw that symbol, or if you draw a symbol that represents what that event meant for you, or anything, there's so many different symbols you could draw. What that does is, instead of always thinking in words, because our minds very easily pick up on images and symbols. So when you've got a symbol for it, it kind of keeps you on that track of like, okay, you would like to feel acceptance of your past. So every time you look at that symbol, you remember that, and it inspires you to keep moving with that. And it's a very simple way to kind of keep yourself on track with things. Um, and and not feel overwhelmed by it, but rather it's been simplified into a very simple image, and it doesn't feel so big anymore. It begins to feel easier. It begins to feel a little bit more tangible, you know. So, yeah. How was that for you guys? Did that feel good to draw the symbol? Yeah, I will send you all the information, and feel free to be in contact.
Sure.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you guys.